We're going to discuss the 2017 Azerbaijan Grand Prix in this episode of the PETRONAS Retro Race Review. And wow, what a busy race. We had multiple safety cars, a red flag, and plenty of drama in between. Shov, just how complicated was this race for you guys on the pit wall?
It's a very different sort of race. When you're on a street track like this, we know that there's a high risk of incidents, and incidents that can bring out a safety car or even red flag the race. So what you're trying to do is manage your risk, control the race, but you're always thinking about what's going to happen next. So it's not like a normal circuit where you know what the strategy is that you want to execute and you're just going in to perform that strategy. This is a bit more like a Monaco, where you're always on your toes, ready for something to happen.
You mentioned Monaco, and of course there are elements of the track that look like that lovely twisty circuit we have in Monaco, but then there's that incredibly long straight as well. And that brings me to our first question from Michael on Instagram, who says, how do you set up the car when you have such a long straight and yet those twisty corners?
The big thing there for setup is the wing level, and we obviously have simulations. We have the driver in loop simulator where they can drive around the track, but we can also do simulations without a driver, sweeping through the aerodynamic settings, looking for the optimum. And the thing with Baku is it's a compromise. You've got Sector 1, which is quite high downforce, Sector 2, maximum downforce, as you said, that's very like Monaco, and then Sector 3, where you've just got one corner onto that whole sector, and then a massive long straight, where you're probably quickest if you didn't even have a rear wing on the car. So it is a compromise. When you get the results of those simulations, you're then looking at it from a point of view of, do you want to carry a bit more wing to try and get the tyres working, or maybe you want to run a little bit less to defend or to attack on those long straights. But that's the bit that the engineers will talk with the drivers about, trying to make the final decision.
Well, let's talk about the start of the race. And unfortunately, Valtteri had contact with Kimi Räikkönen, and that resulted in a puncture that put him right to the back of the field. And Harry has asked on Twitter, when you saw Valtteri last and with that damage, what were your realistic expectations for where he could finish?
I wouldn't really say we had any expectations, because it all depends on what happens in the future. But when you're at the back, even if you're a lap down, when there's a safety car, you get to unlap yourself. And that puts you back into the race. So really, at that stage, it's a case about react on your strategy. So you go to the tyres that you prepared for if you were in on the first lap. But then you've got to really just see what happens. So I think in this instance, it's really just waiting for a safety car, and then it brings you back into the game.
Following on from that question, we've had another one in from Henry on Instagram asking if you had any special strategy to get Valtteri to P2. Was it a combination of having a fast car, but also a good strategy?
It's a bit of both. And I think, fundamentally, the fast car was the thing that allowed him to get back up onto the podium. He overtook, I think, 12 cars. So that was a big factor. The other thing was the race played into his hands a little bit, having ended up at the back so early on, because the safety cars bunch everyone up. So when you're stuck at the back, the leaders are getting away, you're in traffic. But those repeated safety cars bring everyone back together, and you can keep attacking them. So the fact it's neither one nor the other, but it was good attacking driving on Valtteri's part, and a strategy that was able to take advantage of how the race was planning out ahead of us. As you can see in the race planner, after all the safety cars, the red flags, Valtteri's still in the midfield, near the front of the midfield, but he's able to really close on those cars ahead. So he inherits a position from Lewis, who has to fix the headrest, from Vettel, who has to serve that penalty, but the rest of it is passing cars on track. But you can see he can close down this big gap in time down to almost nothing, and also getting Stroll right on the very last lap to take P2.
You mentioned the pack bunching up behind a safety car. I'd love to ask you about how you and the drivers approach a safety car restart in Baku. It looks a very tricky one to get right.
Baku is a very, very difficult restart, the most difficult on the calendar. And there aren't many where the race leader is actually under such threat. But this is down to the layout of the track, and in particular that big long straight. Safety car lights, well, they're normally extinguished around the Sector 2 line. So in Baku, this is as they're coming down the hill just before that final proper corner, turn 16. Now that doesn't give the race leader, so in this instance Lewis, long to let the safety car get ahead. And the reality is that a Formula One car is a lot faster than the safety car, so he's got to let it build a big lead. Now, the other thing is that he mustn't overtake the safety car before it crosses safety car line 1 on its way into the pits. However, behind him, he's got a lot of people who are waiting to react to him getting on the throttle because they want that big long toe that you get down the straights. And that's super powerful at Baku. So, as they come down the hill, you've got Lewis going very slowly. The safety car quickly goes out of his sight. That's because the straight isn't actually straight. It's got kinks in it, and with the walls he can't see it. So Lewis is talking to Bono, his engineer, who's telling him when the safety car's at turn 18, turn 19, and that's a bit the skill of the driver, a bit the hard work that the engineer and the driver put in together, timing the point that you get on throttle, timing the gap that you've given him, so that in a perfect world, the safety car's just peeling in and you can stay at full throttle all the way down the straight, giving yourself the best chance to defend.
It's making me nervous just thinking about it, Shov. Now, we talked about the cars bunching up behind the safety car, and of course we all saw what happened between Sebastian and Lewis under the safety car. And we've had a question in from George on Instagram saying, was Lewis's car damaged by that contact with Vettel in the accident?
There was a bit of damage to the diffuser, but when we had the red flag, we were actually able to do a reasonable repair on that. So you'll never get parts back to the standard that they come out of the factory, but you can recover most of the aerodynamic performance. So in this instance, it wasn't too bad, but really helped by the red flag.
Let's talk about that red flag then. What could you and the mechanics and the engineers do during that time?
We used to be able to do more. We could even change the springs and the roll bars on the car. You could change the ride height. The only rule was you couldn't add weight. So everything had to be weighed to make sure the bits you were putting on were lighter. Now, since then, they've stopped that. So on this occasion, you had a smaller list of work, but we can still change tyres. So that's effectively a fresh set of tyres for free. You don't need to come into the pits. You don't lose time. You can change the front wing angle, you can repair accident damage, so that we were able to take advantage of that, and you can sort of start the car and do normal things just to check the power unit's okay. But it's a relatively limited job list. But also you've got to make sure you're ready to go at the restart. So you don't want to take too many bits off the car because you've got to get them back in and ready to go in a hurry.
After the red flag period, we then had that difficult moment for you and the team and Lewis when the headrest came loose, and we heard Bono talking to Lewis about how to deal with it over the radio. Gigi on Twitter has asked, what made the headrest come off?
Well, basically it's got two locating pins in the back of it that go into the back of the chassis. And the reality was that they'd come loose, it's worked its way up. Now, that detail on the headrest is not the sort of thing that you change when you design a new car year on year. And in fact, in our case, it had remained the same for many years. So this was really a sort of, 1 in 10,000 unfortunate incident. It's the sort of thing that could have happened in free practice and would have just come in and fixed it. As it happens, it occurs when you're leading a race. And it's obviously a big safety factor. You've got to bring the car in, you've got to put it right. And we changed it. Now, since then, we modify the design slightly to make sure that it's never going to happen again. But it was really just an unlucky timing for a problem that was kind of in there that one day was going to appear.
So frustrating. And what did that mean for the rest of Lewis's race?
Well, it's very difficult. After those penalties are served, Lewis and Vettel are in P8 and P7 respectively. But we've had all the drama, all the excitement, and those were the things that allowed you to recover positions. So it's very difficult to get the time back when you don't get another safety car. There were some slower cars that they were able to get by. We had Alonso out there, Magnussen, also Esteban Ocon. They were able to make those passes. But one of the issues for Lewis was Vettel was a fast car. So once you're stuck behind him, he's one of the most difficult people on track to pass. And essentially that's where he ended up. So it was a frustrating day, but your mindset at this stage of the season, remember it's still early in the year, is about recovering every single point, because you don't know that you're going to rely on 1 or 2 points to win a championship in the end. So it's all about recovery, making sure that the driver doesn't get disheartened. We can worry about what we could have done better once the race is over, but when you're in that, you're just scrapping for every single point.
Well, it was a great race to watch. Shov, thank you so much for helping me review the Azerbaijan Grand Prix from 2017.
Thank you very much.